Let's move on now. We just showed you the virtual BRICS Summit that just wrapped up, where Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi chaired the same summit and put the focus on the BRICS Summit becoming more result-orientated. And of course, Afghanistan continued to dominate the discussion between different global leaders. Now, for more insights into the discussions at the BRICS Summit, joining us now is our principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sibal from New Delhi. Siddhant, thanks for joining us. Now, let's talk about some of the biggest highlights of the BRICS Summit. As we know, the Indian Prime Minister, put the focus on making the BRICS Summit more result-orientated. What can you tell us about this?
Well, India is the host of the BRICS, and the summit just a short while ago concluded with the Indian Prime Minister focusing on the initiatives that have been taken, how in November the water resources ministers will be meeting, and how in the past as well number of meetings have taken place. But if you look at the speeches of all the leaders, the most interesting speech was of the Russian President Vladimir Putin, who used the occasion in a sense to talk about Afghanistan. In fact, he was the only leader to specifically mention Afghanistan and also talk about how the developments in Afghanistan can be a source of instability, how Afghanistan can become a source of drugs when it comes to terrorism as well. And he talked about how the entire crisis, in a sense, happened because of the withdrawal, in fact, hasty withdrawal of Americans and its allies. The fact that the Russian president has used BRICS platform to talk about the US failure is an interesting point. If you look at what the South African side had to speak about, they specifically mentioned about the reforms which are needed at the United Nations Security Council. He specifically mentioned about an African seat at the United Nations Security Council. Remember, earlier this year, the BRICS foreign ministers had met virtually, and there was a specific mention when it comes to the reforms at UNSC. Now, this statement is important and interesting for the only reason that two P5 members, Russia and China, endorse this statement, and that too in the Indian presidency. If we look at the speech by the Brazilian leadership, he basically talked about how we need to cooperate more. The Chinese President Xi Jinping also focused on the multilateralism as a way forward. But largely, the BRICS, of course, emerged after the 2008 economic crisis, has become an important feature of the global geopolitical calendar. Next year, Chinese will be hosting this summit. For 2 years in a row now, we know the summit is happening in a virtual format. But if the Chinese decide to do it in-person meeting, then the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is expected to travel to China. That is an important development given how relationship between India and China hasn't been working, and primarily in the backdrop of the crisis, whether it's the Doklam crisis of 2017 or whether it's the Galwan crisis of last year. We have seen India and China in a sense meeting or becoming face-to-face at the important meetings, like whether it's the BRICS or whether it's the G20. So these groupings, whether it's the G20, whether it's BRICS, whether it's SCO, have in a sense replaced the UN system essentially when it comes to taking practical decision, primarily because the UN system is being seen as a failure when it comes to the current crisis, whether it's Afghanistan or the COVID pandemic.
Siddhant, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for all those updates. WION World is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.